communications, etc. So before I hand over to Laura to tell us more about Pure and Research Explorer, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background for those that don't know about the programme. So everybody's here from the team that you can see on this today. So if you could do a little wave on the teams with the hand or whatever, with your real hand, for example. Holly, myself, Charlie and Karen, who's led today's event. We work on this programme, which is for the whole university, to help people to do things in teams that they couldn't do otherwise, and learn the principles and the ways of working to implement those different skills and tools to do so. So we do that in a number of work streams. We have the main crux of our work which is what Holly leads, is a suite of team skills and training sessions. They are usually in person, but we now also have a self-led online learning set of modules which are all on Blackboard. We're going to make sure that they're available externally to the university as well shortly. So with 3 modules already up there for self-led learning, and the next 3 are just being finalised. We also have standard training sessions. I'll come to information about those in a second. We have seminars like the one today. There are a suite of case studies online which you can have a look at, and if you've got an example where team research principles and ways of working have been used well in another project you'd like us to include in that portfolio, please let us know. Get in touch with Karen. We have a reading group which meets regularly. We have a very informal online chat about an article. It might be a academic publication, or it might be a blog or something else, or a book chapter. Got a whole heap of resources and a bit of a knowledge toolkit online on our website, which Karen's curated, which is very good, very helpful. If there's anything that you know of that you think should also be added there, again, please let us know, but I hope that's useful. And we've had 2 years of micro project funding to help people to spark up new initiatives around ways of working that help people to team. So that's what we do. Mentioning the team research in-person workshops, our next all-day in-person session, which Karen's putting in the chat as well, is here. So there's a QR code if it'll take you to the website. Holly and Karen will be leading that, and we're going to be having that on site. Please do book your tickets before they all go. It's a great day, and we've had some fantastic feedback on it, so please do make use of that. That may be our last one for a little while, so do make use of that. Don't look at that, that's secret. Okay, that's for later. Okay, very good. So I'm going to hand over to Laura. Thank you, Laura, for joining us today. Laura is going to tell us a bit more about the university system that we use called Pure and Research Explorer, and how we can make best use of that.
Thanks, Ruth. So I'll share some slides in a second, but just a quick thank you to the team for allowing me to come along and speak this morning. I've got a couple of slides, probably cover about 10 minutes or so. There's absolutely no way I'm going to cover Pure and Research Explorer in its entirety in 10 minutes. Often when people ask us to come and speak, it's half a day or a full day, and I've often joked that we could probably do a residential about it if we really wanted to. So this is a very whistle-stop tour of really with a focus on how you might want to use Pure and Research Explorer to showcase the activities that you're doing within your teams. So it's got that sort of focus on it today. I've got some contact details at the end, which I'll share with you, but just an open offer, I guess, to say if there's anything to do with Pure, if you're not sure about how to use it, where to start even, please get in touch with us after the session. Don't be a stranger. We're here to help you and make the most of the tool that we've got at Manchester. So unfortunately, I've got to go after my session, but I'll share those contact details. So please do get in touch if we can be of any help. Okay, let's share some slides. Let's move you over there.
Can we change our logo to the one that Laura's got, please? I'm joking. I just think it looks really cool.
Thank you. Okie doke. So we'll have a little bit of a walkthrough about how you can use Pure to really emphasize team collaboration. Okay, so I'll just recap for everybody in the room what this thing is called Pure, because I appreciate not everybody might be familiar with that, and also what is this thing called Research Explorer, because we often use the terms interchangeably and it's not often clear what those things are. I'll talk you through how, as a team working collaboratively, you might want to make use of some of the features in Pure. As I've said, specifically around showcasing the activity of the team, I think that's probably the most relevant part for today. And then I'll show you some nice examples of showcasing of project activity that you can create. And an example of one that we created yesterday for a colleague that got in touch who wanted to showcase his particular research group. So we handle requests like this all the time. So it's something that we can work up quite quickly. And then I'll touch on some help and support for after the session. Okie doke, so back to basics. So if you've never come across Pure before, we've had Pure at the University of Manchester for about 10 years. If you've been around for a little while, you may have heard of this thing. We've been talking about it for a long time. But if you've never come across it before, basically, it's the university's research information system. It's a great big database about what we do at Manchester and all our different research activity. Research Explorer, if you've not come across that term, is effectively a set of hundreds of thousands of web pages that are hosted on the within the university's website, which is showcasing publicly available content from Pure. So if you think of Pure as the back-end system where records are created, and you can think of Research Explorer as the web front end, the showcasing of that research activity that we do at Manchester. So the two things are effectively the same. Pure is just the application. Research Explorer was a brand name that we came up with many, many years ago just to group those pages together on the university's website. And I'll show you what it looks like in a second as well and how you can get to it. I'll pop a link in the chat if anybody's not seen that resource before. One of the key things that Research Explorer is used for, as well as showcasing generally what we do at the university, is it's also the home for our academic staff and our postgraduate research student profiles, of which I think that number's a little bit low now, but just under around 6,000. So Pure is the system in which our academic colleagues and our PGR students log in, create a profile, talk about the work that they're involved with, all of the amazing activities that they undertake, and they can use that information to create a profile within Research Explorer. So you can see how all these things are linked. But Research Explorer isn't just profiles. So Pure as a system does quite a lot for the university. It underpins quite a lot of our university processes. We're not possibly going to go through them all today, but one of the main functions of Research Explorer is the showcasing of a data set within Pure, which is our university publication repository. So when our academic colleagues publish journal articles, when they produce books, book chapters, working papers, all of that activity goes into Pure as the university's institutional repository, and the majority of that data is then showcased on Research Explorer. So you can imagine all of this content about our staff, our students, the publications that they're creating. All of that information goes into Pure, and the records that are deemed to be publicly available go out onto Research Explorer. And Research Explorer isn't just an internal tool. So often people think, oh, is it an internal directory? You might remember the old staff directory that we used to have. Research Explorer is an external tool as well as an internal one at the university. So all of the information that academic and PGR colleagues choose to make publicly available is searchable. So that's not just by ourselves as member of staff, maybe looking for experts to collaborate with or expertise. It could be potential students looking for supervisors. It could be potential industry partners looking to see if they want to collaborate with us. It could be industry looking for a piece of kit. So maybe we've got specialists, or we've got a specialist facility or a lab and we offer a service. So Research Explorer is that web front end, almost an entry point to finding your way about Manchester, our research and what we can offer. So hopefully that makes sense to people. I will show it to you in a second, but it's a great big searchable database. So in terms of the team and how teams can make the most use of it, there's a couple of different things that you can do. So as an individual, some questions to ask yourself about a profile. So you as an individual or the people that you work with in your team, do you have a profile? So it's worth noting that by default, when you start at the university, your profile isn't turned on. So we make it a choice for everybody, and we do that deliberately so that we don't have empty profiles which don't add very much value. So it's a choice for, and not everybody wants a profile, which is absolutely fine, but it's worth seeing if you're working in a team, if you're collaborating, does everybody have a profile? If you're the expert in a particular field and you don't have a profile, how can people find you? Are you looking to collaborate with people perhaps outside your immediate department or school or externally? If you don't have that web presence, that university web presence, how do you expect people to be able to find you? If you have a profile, next question is it up to date? And we find a few people are a little bit guilty of this. So as a central function, we do our best to try and add as much data to Pure on behalf of academic colleagues. So if you're an academic and you use Pure regularly, you might find that content is added on your behalf. So publications, for example, we have an amazing team in the library who are always looking for newly published outputs, and they will add them to Pure on people's behalf. We do an exercise in my team where we look for press media articles that our researchers are cited in, and we add those to Pure on people's behalf. So behind the scenes, we're trying to keep it up to date, but ultimately it's the individual academic who knows what they're involved in at any point in time. So what we say is, it's not meant to be an exercise in lots and lots of data entry, but if you're working on a particular problem or you're looking to collaborate, is that reflected on your profile? Will people know how to approach you and what to approach you about? The third thing is, do you have any contact details? So again, by default, contact details aren't shown on Pure profiles. Again, we make it a person's choice, but it's really easy to forget to add them. So just a quick check for anybody who has a profile, are your contact details on there? Are they up to date? And as we've mentioned before, if someone was looking for you and what you're doing right now, if they search for some keyword terms around what you're involved in, would you come up? It's a useful exercise to do after the session if you've got 5 minutes. Put in the keywords in the areas that you work and see if you come back as one of the search results, because if you don't, people can't find you. So just a couple of really easy things to check. Now, one of the other things that we offer in Pure is the ability to have a project or a team page, and I'm going to very quickly show you some examples before I finish today. But effectively, it's like a profile, but for a team. So it doesn't have to be a funded project. It doesn't really have to be a formal team. It can just be a piece of research or a problem that you're trying to solve, but you want to be able to represent it on the web. So one of the things that you can do is check if the team has a page. If you don't have a page, get in touch with us. We can set you one up and I'll show you some examples of what pages can look like. Is it up to date? Are you going to keep it up to date? Are you going to keep reflecting the activities that the teams are involved in? Maybe you've done some outreach activity, maybe you've done some social responsibility, maybe it's a new journal article that the group have been involved in. Who's going to keep it up to date? Because remember, if it's up to date, people can find you. And again, similarly with the individual profile, do a couple of search terms. If the things that you're searching for mean that your project page isn't coming back, people can't find you. So it might just need tweaking a little bit. It's useful to keep it up to date in terms of things that you're working on, but also perhaps things that you want to work on in the future as well, because it's not, I think it's important that our pages are not always retrospective. They're also describing what we would like to do in the future as well, especially for future collaboration. And does it include the whole team? You know, project pages don't just have to be about very senior academics being listed on pages. It's meant to represent the whole team. So you might have students working with you on a collaboration, it might be postdocs, it might be technical staff. There's options to include all of the team on a project page, and I think that's really important. I mean, in terms of this supporting activity, I've touched on a few things there, but one of the nice things that you can do on these project pages is show related activity. So maybe recent publications, recent activities, recent press coverage. There's a whole variety of things. Hopefully there's a category for everything that you might want to cover. So there's some options, some things to think about after the session. Okay, so I'll just quickly show you some examples of what these project pages look like, but I'll start by showing you Research Explorer just for anybody perhaps who hasn't seen that. So I'm just going to flick over to the web. So for anybody that's not seen Research Explorer, I'll pop this link in the chat if anybody wants to click on it. This is Research Explorer. So going back to where I started, Research Explorer is the front end of Pure. So everything that you see on this page and everything that's buried behind it is all coming from Pure. So you can see over here, there are the researcher and the PGR profiles. You've got research units, you can look at publications, you can look at projects and so on and so forth. If you've never looked at Research Explorer before, please do go and have a play with it. As I said, it's this great big searchable database. So if you're looking for potential collaborators, if you're looking to see if we've worked in a particular area, just start with some really simple keyword searches and then you can go in and refine what you're looking for. There's lots of different ways to search. So as I say, keywords is a great way to start. But you can also delve into particular content. You can look across the faculty and school structure at Manchester. You can look across these non-hierarchical units as well. So our platforms, our beacons, our institutes. You can also drill down into content where it's been linked to one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So you can see here if we click on one, you can look at people that have been tagged with that SDG, outputs, projects, impacts, so on and so forth. And then even if you want to, you can go in and look by geographical area as well. Perhaps less relevant to today, but just to show you how that works, you can literally pick a part of the world and say, where have we been collaborating? What organisations have we worked with in Kazakhstan? And you can see here that we've got co-authorship with universities in Kazakhstan. So you can go on and have a drill down in lots and lots of different ways. But what I'm going to show you in the last couple of minutes of this presentation is specifically around this section here called projects. So this is where we build these team pages or project pages. I'm just going to show you some what I think are quite nice examples of what you can do. So over here, I've just got some examples to show you. So this is what a project page looks like. So you've got the title of your page or your project or your problem statement. You've got all of the colleagues at the university that are involved in this particular piece of work. You can see all these links that are clickable, so you can go through to the individuals that are named on them if you want to. You can see which parts of the university it belongs to. And then as we scroll down, you begin to get some more detail about the project. So you can see that this particular project has created some related activity, and we'll look at that in a second, but it's got some publications. It's also got some press media coverage as well, which is quite interesting. They've added a really nice description of what it is that the team or the project does. Again, all this is really useful because if somebody's searching for an expert or a particular project, there's lots and lots here to pick up in terms of keywords. You can see here what they've done is they've used this page to be complementary to other pages that they've got, perhaps on the university's website or externally. So this looks to be a link out to another part of the university. I think a lot of us are familiar with this Cloudy with a Chance of Paying project. So there's another link out to the projects there. But again, one of the main things about these pages is it's another way, another complementary way of helping people find you and the research that you're doing. It's not meant to be the only page. It can be if you want, but it could be something that complements your own website or your profile or lots of different things. So we've got a really nice description of this piece of work. We've got some dates around when it started. We can see that it's working in these particular UN SDG areas. And then down here, you can see the related content. So you can see that this project, the people that are running this page have linked to a particular set of publications that they've supported, and also some really nice press media work that they've got. So a link out to a short film, and again, you can go and watch that. some expert comment that one of the academics involved has given, and you can go out and read that article as well, and so on and so forth. So coming back to that description at the beginning of Pure being a great big relational database, you can see that you can start on one page and go down a little bit of a rabbit hole with lots of information. But it's just lots of different ways to showcase what you're doing as the team. I'll just show you one more example quickly. So this is an example. We had a request from this particular professor yesterday. He's got this particular research group. So this isn't a project as such, but it's an actual group. He emailed and said, I want a web presence for my group. So we set this up probably yesterday afternoon. So if it's something of interest to colleagues on the call today, it's quick to do. And once they're set up, you manage them yourselves in Pure. You don't need to come to us. You don't have to use WordPress. You don't have to use T4. It's just a page that you manage in Pure. And anybody named on the record can update it. It's meant to be collaborative. So just to show you very quickly, it follows a very similar format. You can see here we've got details about the group and what they do, what their expertise is. And unbelievably, overnight, the professor who asked for this page to be set up has added 101 related research outputs. He was very, very keen to get this set up. I thought he was going to add about 10, but he's added 100 overnight. You don't need to do that. It's quite impressive. But just to give you an example. So please do go and have a look if you've not been on Research Explorer. There's lots of these pages. They're all different shapes and sizes. You can add as much or as little detail as you want. So I'll stop there because I'm very conscious of time and I don't want to make us overrun right at the beginning. I'll just finally, if my slides allow, just share some contact details with you. So that was a whistle-stop tour of a very small part of Pure. If you've got any questions about what we've covered this morning, please just email us. Email is the usual way that people get in touch with us, pure@manchester.ac.uk. Anything to do with Pure, it doesn't have to be projects or teams or profiles, it can be publications, it can be anything. We'll triage any query that comes to Pure, so pure@manchester.ac.uk, nice and easy to remember. We have a page on StaffNet with tons and tons of guides. If you love a manual, if a manual is your thing, there's lots of manuals and PDF guides and videos and things. I'd encourage you to go and have a look. And then probably it might be most useful for colleagues on the call today, if there's anything that we've shown this morning that perhaps doesn't make sense or you're really interested in and you want to know a bit more, as a team we offer dedicated one-to-one sessions, so you can book a date and a time in the diary that works for you. You'll get one of the team, just you and them, for half an hour to look at what it is that you want to achieve in Pure. You can do that via the inbox as well if you want to, but if you want that dedicated time in the diary to do that, we offer that as well. And the QR code there takes you through to the link, because the link is horrible and nobody will remember that. So you just use the QR code. And that's it for me, Ruth. I hope I'm on time.
Oh, that's brilliant, Laura. Absolute revelations to me. Thank you so absolutely brilliant. I was typing to Charlie and I was like, did you know you could have a team on Pure? And she's like, no. On Research Explorer, she's like, no. I was like, this is brilliant. Right, Charlie's got a hand up, and I will come to her. Please, any questions, if you could put your hand up or put it in the chat. We'll have a couple of questions for Laura before we move on to our keynote. Charlie, did you have a question?
I did. Well, first of all, to say huge thank you, Laura. I always find Pure horrible to use, although it is this massive repository of information, as you've said, and I'm sure it's really, really useful. And I will make a one-to-one appointment because I think I can use it much better.
Yeah, absolutely.
But thank you. That was so useful. And so part of the kind of discussion Ruth and I were having separately was when you might want a team or a project page on Pure rather than a website, because you talked just then, latterly, the last example was about a kind of team page, if you like, or presence on Pure. Is there a time where you might want one or the other or both, do you think?
I think there is. So it's fair to say that, as I said right at the beginning, Pure is a research information system. It's not a website builder, and we always have to say that. So it depends on the level of functionality. I think there's pros and cons to both. What we tend to do is the faculty web teams, if you ever get in touch with them about building a website, they have a little bit of guidance about when Pure might be appropriate versus when a website is appropriate. What I would say is that if you need something quick and simple, you need that URL, you need it up quickly, Pure is a great place to start because they can be spun up very, very quickly. In terms of overall control of those pages, as I mentioned, once they're set up, they're yours. You don't need to come to us or to the web team to do any sort of maintenance. So I think they're fairly low maintenance for that sort of thing. The other big benefit from using Pure is that because the pages are built in Pure, along with all of the other information, you're linked in already to a repository. So for example, that academic that had linked that page to 100 publications overnight, he could do that because both the project and the publications are in Pure, so it's nice and easy to do.
Yeah.
Where we would advise the website route is where you need more complex functionality. So you'll be able to notice from our pages that the support for images and video at the moment is quite limited. It's getting better, certainly on the images front. Multimedia is coming as well. But if you got that need now to have those sorts of features, we would, if you came to us, we would steer you towards the faculty web teams. I guess the other thing to say with the Pure route is that because we have it, it's well supported, there's no cost to these pages, which I guess is something you have to factor in if you perhaps certainly need a third-party website. Whereas if you do them in Pure, you don't need to worry about is the data secure, who's got access to it. All of those horrible sorts of things are taken care of because we deal with it in the central function. But I would say if you've got those more advanced features that you need to touch on, that might be when you need to start thinking about a website, and maybe have both, as you said, Charlotte, because this is about finding people and finding experts, and you can't ever do too much of that sometimes.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. Thank you, Laura.
No worries.
Thank you. Okay, Julia.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I also didn't know that you could have groups on Pure, so that was really great. I was emailing my bosses as you were presenting to say, oh, should we get this? So thank you very much. I just have a couple of questions. One is, I guess, technical. So in terms of what you can put on Pure, is all you need is a DOI. So could you put things like protocols, or do they need to be published articles?
No, it's quite flexible, Julia. So there's all different. We didn't really get to cover it very much, so it might be worth us picking up afterwards. But there's a whole range of different modules in Pure where you can log all different types of activities. And we like to be really clear when we talk about that it really isn't just about publications, because I think sometimes our systems can be so focused on journal articles, we forget about the amazing array of other types of outputs that we produce. So it's definitely not just publications. If you've got certain things in mind, let's pick it up and we can find the right home for it in Pure so that you can showcase it in the right way.
Okay, great. I think that answers my question. So
oh, super. Okay.
I'll be setting up a one-to-one, I think.
Brilliant. I'm looking forward to some extra traffic from the group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thanks so much, Laura.
No
well, as I
worries,
say, I think you've changed our lives, frankly.
Steady on.
And there's loads of people we need to tell this to. So we will share this, especially if it's like maybe a smaller project or something that's not going to last too long, but you do have to report, and maybe you just want somewhere for the funder to go or for a partner to go, or but you don't want the overheads of a website. I think it feels a really good space. So
definitely.
Thank you very much for sharing that.
That's great. Thank you so much for slotting us into the agenda.
Yeah, really good. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks to you. I'm going to hand over to Tayana for our keynote talk now. I'm delighted to introduce everybody to Tayana Soukup, who's a chartered psychologist and a fellow of the Royal Society for Public Health, and is an elected board co-director for the International Network for the Science of Team Science, which is kind of an international body, and kind of the reason that the Teams Build Dreams programme exists. because I found out about how to do a lot of this stuff a number of years ago through that network. So Tayana's going to give us an overview today of how to assess team working and collaboration in a multidisciplinary team. So Tayana, over to you.
Oh, lovely, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. So I'm going to pull up the slides, if that's okay. Just see. Okay. Nearly there. It's just uploading. You should be able to see the slides in a minute. Are you able to hear me okay? Is the sound working? Yeah, good. Okay. I've learned a new function in Microsoft Teams in terms of uploading slides. I don't know if people are aware of this, but you can, instead of sharing the window, you can actually share the PowerPoint live, which is you get a lot more functions available. So could you please confirm whether you can see the slides okay, whether you've got a full view of the slide? Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Tayana Sukup, chartered psychologist, also fellow in human factors at Imperial. And just as Ruth said, I'm also I'm on the board of directors for Insight. So I'm one of the only international or non-American based members of the board. So for over a decade, my research has focused on how multidisciplinary teams work, especially in healthcare. And today I'll share some of the key lessons we've learned. So this is where I'm based, by the way. So within one of the 14 NIHR Health Tech Research Centres in England. This one is led by Professor George Hanna, and it's situated within the Department of Surgery and Cancer at Imperial College London. So here's the plan. So first I'll briefly introduce the principles of team science, lay foundations basically, before we dive into a real world case of cancer MDTs. Okay. So. But, let's start with the big picture. So why does team science matter? Today's challenges, and I think, we've got a lot of them, from climate change to cancer to AI, are way too complex for any one discipline to solve on their own. So they do demand, diverse perspectives, and evidence shows that teams consistently produce more innovative, higher impact science than individuals on their own. But the key message, is that effective teamwork is not automatic. If you put smart people in the same room, that will not guarantee collaboration. So it does require it does take a bit of structure, leadership, and intentional effort to make the teamwork work. And that's what we'll explore today. So. But to move forward, I really do need to clarify these two concepts. It is really a very important starting point. So team science versus science of team science. So team science is about doing collaborative research. So teams from different disciplines working together to solve complex problems. And my NIHR Health Tech Centre, where I come from, is a good example of this. So we have scientists, clinicians, industry, and patients co-developing research on diagnostics, for example. And SCITS, for short, Science of Team Science, is about studying how teams work. So really identifying what makes collaboration effective. And, perhaps this seminar itself is a sort of SCITS-informed activity. So we're using evidence to strengthen teamwork. And why does that distinction matter? And it's a very important distinction to make. Because how we do research and not just what we discover is a worthy object of study. So it's essential for advancing science. Now, also, I couldn't really talk about MDTs without, laying out the essential conditions for effective teamwork first. That's sort of, really important foundational principles that I do need to sort of cover before I talk about MDTs. And after that, we're going to turn to system level enablers as well. So first of all, psychological safety. So you cannot have effective teamwork without people feeling safe to speak up, without fear of embarrassment or dismissal. So it's really about taking that interpersonal risk. And when psychological safety is missing, people, they go quiet. So it's important that leaders and other members model that openness. So welcoming questions, owning mistakes, treating disagreements as useful learning points. Then cognitive diversity, very important in any teams and in particular science teams. Different ways of thinking can boost creativity and decision quality, but only if managed well. And you're going to see in Cancer MDTs some of the pitfalls in terms of inclusion of cognitive diversity. So without shared goals and inclusive norms, diversity can fragment teams. So simple structures, things like, clear language, rotating facilitators, shared glossaries, and things like that can help make diversity usable and not just present. Intentional team composition. So who is in the room matters. So it's not just the logistics, it's really, it's a strategy. A mix of skills, perspectives, and roles is important, including boundary spanners or the connectors who often hold teams together. And diversity also, includes lived experience and communication styles, and not just, job titles and demographics. Shared leadership and followership. So we don't often talk much about this. And I think leadership is probably one of the most misunderstood concepts, at least in academia. But leadership is not about seniority. It's about enabling collaboration and supporting others. That's really the key message. And high functioning teams distribute leadership across members. And since most of us spend more time following than leading, followership matters just as much. So good followership is active. So it means engaging thoughtfully, holding each other to account, and keeping the team aligned and coordinated. Structured decision making is also something we don't talk about enough in academia, I think. But good decisions follow a very structured process. So you got to define the problem, set goals, and then explore alternative options, and then evaluate those options systematically. So it's really, about making the thinking process of the team more visible and transparent. And when we look at the MDTs, we're going to see why that is important and what happens when that's not working well. Virtual collaboration is also an important aspect we need to talk about these days because it has become common, especially since COVID. So virtual teams need agreed norms, how we communicate, when we respond, where information lives, etc. There's a really interesting document I can share with you, produced by the researchers from QEQM, who developed digital norms to improve flow and equity in MDTs, which can be adapted for other teams as well. But I think the key message is, that with the right scaffolding, virtual teams can also thrive. Now I'm going to move to the next slide. Okay, great. System level conditions. So that's what teams can do internally, but even the best functioning teams are influenced by the wider systems around them. So let's look at that next. So one very important thing, and I'm going to come back to that measurement later on again, but whether in person or virtual, the key question is, how do we know if the team is working well? So teamwork is often treated as intangible, but it can, as should be measured, and validated tools exist. I'm going to give you a toolkit at the end of the talk with a list of the tools that we currently have, but there are, of course, more than that. But these tools are not just for reporting, they give insight for improvement. So instead of, relying on assumptions or anecdotes, we can actually use data, either periodically or in real time through check-ins and reflections. Now, rethinking success, that's really, really important. So if we can measure teamwork, we also need to rethink what counts as success. So, we've got these traditional metrics, publications, citations, etc., but they miss the value of collaborative work. Recently, there is this drive of having, shared first authorship, shared last authorship. And in fact, I have seen a paper recently where all authors had shared first authorship. So there was no one last, everyone shared equal status. I thought that's really a nice way of showing collaboration. But teams generate, impact in many other ways, influencing policy, improving services, creating tools, or reaching underserved groups. And that's the value proposition of teams. It's really combining diverse knowledge to solve problems individuals cannot tackle alone. So the idea is that we need to move towards a more holistic view of success, which includes internal success, how well the team's functions, measuring the conditions I've just shown you, but then also external success, which is basically what change the team enables. So success isn't just what the team delivers, it's also how they work together and who benefits from their work. Now, if we're expanding success to include how teams function, we also need to build those capabilities intentionally. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that teamwork is innate, but it's not. It is a skill set. So collaboration, communication, reflection, leadership, these are all trainable across career stages. And the most important system enabler really is the institutional support, and perhaps something that we don't talk enough about this in academia. So even when a team gets its internal dynamics right, training and evaluation right, its success can still be shaped or constrained by the broader institutional context. So one of the biggest barriers is misaligned incentives. So success often centers on individual outputs, first-class authorship, solo grants, PA status, while collaboration, unless exceptional, is sort of undervalued, overlooked. So the message, that you get as a researcher, at least in academia, is that, collaboration may be praised, but it often doesn't count when it matters the most. So we also need to name academic hierarchies. So the people who hold teams together, research staff, operational colleagues, often sit low on the ladder with limited voice recognition, and security. And those with more institutional power may be less involved in sort of day-to-day teamwork. And this is worsened by, I don't know if you've come across this term. You see a lot in psychology research, but projectification of research careers. So you have short-term grant-type roles with little support for continuity or team development. So instead of building stable teams, we build silos that dissolve basically when funding ends. So even in well-meaning settings, these structures can undermine cohesion and sustainability. Now, there are encouraging signs from funders, but change, cannot stop there. If we want collaboration to flourish, we do need to align incentives, reduce exclusion, and build structures that support teamwork in practice. So how do these principles play out in the real world, especially in complex, high-stakes environments? So I want to take you into that world briefly because it offers a powerful lens on what makes teamwork work or not. And the key question I want to leave you with as we go into this example is, what might these themes teach us about enabling high-functioning, diverse teams, across disciplines, sectors, and roles? Okay, so here they are, Cancer multidisciplinary teams. This is what they look like. Sort of, this is their weekly meeting, and Cancer for short, we call them MDTs. Full name is multidisciplinary teams, and they are a key feature of UK cancer services. So these teams meet weekly. It's mandatory in the UK, and they discuss and decide treatment recommendations for individual patients. So they bring together cross-disciplinary expertise into one decision-making space, and this is their decision-making space. This is what you're seeing on the screen. So they're also, I should say, one of the most extensively researched real-world themes I've come across in the literature. So there are now at least 15 years of robust research evidence on how they function. So they sit sort of right at the intersection, of complexity, uncertainty, and collaboration. So it's important to clarify, however, that these teams, so they're not doing research, so they're not an example of team science in traditional sense, but they're a live test case for the science of team science, or SCIT. So they allow us to observe how teams function, so when, how, and why those functions break down. So what a Cancer MDT is designed to do, so at their core, they bring together diverse expertise to standardize care and reduce variation in care. The structure supports faster, more coordinated decisions, which streamline patient journeys. And they're also designed to promote guideline adherent care, contributing to better survival rates and outcomes. And that's important because survival rates in the UK lagged behind many European countries in the 90s. And so in the 90s, MDTs were introduced to help with that problem, basically. So, but MDTs go beyond clinical delivery, as you can see here on the slides right at the bottom. So they serve, a relational and developmental function as well. So building trust among professionals, MDT members, reassuring patients that a full range of expertise has been considered while supporting peer learning in context. So you might have junior doctors sitting in the meetings, also learning, about complex cases, etc., etc. So what we see here goes beyond, a purely clinical model. It's a real world testbed for team science. These teams strive to align. So you've got technical expertise, relational and procedural performance to achieve better outcomes. And, it is that alignment between team purpose, team function, and team impact that SCITS seeks to understand and enhance. So it's really a perfect environment for a team scientist to study. Now, what MDTs are designed to deliver and what they actually deliver in practice doesn't always match. So over the past decade, repeated national reviews and strategy documents have raised concerns about their functioning. And that's led to a national push to improve MDTs. But as you will see next, many of these efforts focus on surface level mechanics, right? Not on the sort of underlying team dynamics that determine whether a group can actually function as a team. And that's where team science becomes essential, because efficiency alone will not fix a team that lacks the core conditions that we talked about earlier for collaboration. So here's where we begin to see the disconnect between what MDTs are meant to deliver and what they often look like in practice. So here on the left side of the screen, you'll see the guidelines and recommendations, and on the right side, you'll see scientific evidence. So guidelines describes MDTs as the gold standard in cancer care, and the rationale will sound very familiar. Sort of diversity brings best performance, particularly for complex cases. But when we look at what actually happens in these teams, the picture is more uneven. There's one clinician who told us, there's a quote here on the right side, "I'm always amazed how very able staff can be so passive." And that has consequences in this context. So when participation is uneven, decisions can be incomplete, they can be harder to implement or not made at all, basically. So the key takeaway really is diversity alone doesn't guarantee effective teamwork. So you do need to have the right structures and team dynamics in place to make diversity functional and not just present in the room, if that makes sense. So let's look at that visually. So what you're looking at here is a chart that comes from one of our observational studies of breast cancer MDTs. So each bar here shows how much different professional groups contribute to case discussion in the meeting. So what you'll notice immediately is how unequal these bars are, because each of these bars represents contribution for a different discipline that makes up an MDT. So you can see that surgeon and pathologist speak the most, nurses the least, and chairs role was often unclear, which is why there's no bar. And that matters because nurses often hold the most patient-facing insight. And these are critical for recommendations that are, to formulate recommendations that are realistic and implementable. So from a team science lens, this shows a breakdown in several core SCITS conditions. So diversity is present, but it's not functional. Psychological safety appears weak, especially for underheard voices like nurses, and a role clarity is lacking, so particularly for the chair. Now, this slide draws on another observational study, and this time looking at how many different professional groups actually contribute to a case discussion. So you can see that here. So what we found, again, is striking, truly multidisciplinary dialogue, meaning 4 or more groups engaged in a single case discussion, happened in only 8% of discussions in the meeting. So that means that voices that could offer critical insights were either absent or silent. So MDTs, are designed to integrate multiple forms of expertise and not to default to one disciplinary view or another alone. So from a SCITS perspective, this tells us, poor integration of cognitive diversity, weak or, missing interactional norms for inclusive participation, and fall back on default structures, in this case, discipline-based hierarchy. So I just want to clarify, the issue isn't that the surgeons or oncologists are doing something wrong, it's that the structure of the meeting doesn't consistently support participation. So without that intentional, deliberate facilitation, shared norms, and psychological safety, even a well-staffed team can fail to realize the benefits of diversity. Now, the second row here addresses the gap between, again, policy and practice. So national guidance is very clear. Delivering high quality care requires understanding not just the disease, but the person. So this is about information integration when making treatment decisions. But when we look at what actually happens in MDT meetings, the picture is very, very different. And I'm going to try to show that to you graphically, again, based on the data we have, using validated tools. So when we look at what actually gets discussed in MDT meetings, like I said, the pattern is very different. So what you see here, these bars represent different aspects of information that's needed for the MDT to make a treatment recommendation. So what's immediately obvious is that biomedical information, so that's the one on the left, dominates, while information about comorbidities, psychosocial factors, and patient preferences was much less frequently mentioned. And that, of course, has consequences in this context. When you don't consider these domains, these decisions may be, technically or medically correct, appropriate, but impossible to implement or unacceptable to the patient. So teams, the teams can't make high quality decisions when they're only seeing part of the whole picture. So from team science standpoint, it reflects, failure in information integration, boundary spanning, and he also suggests weak shared mental models. So it seems that not everyone agrees on what information is relevant for decision making. So while the guidance calls for, holistic care, the team's processes as currently structured do not reliably support it, as you can see in this graph. We should really be seeing all of these bars should be high. So based on our research, these are the most common reasons why MDTs fail to make a treatment recommendation for patients, ranked by importance. Now, interestingly, issues like, if you look right at the bottom of this list, issues like disagreement, poor attendance, complexity, often assumed to be the main barriers, rank much lower. So from a team science perspective, this points again to information integration as the key vulnerability in these teams. So the team's ability to act depends not on conflict, but rather on what is or is not known, shared, or surfaced or voiced in the room. This model here tells you, further reinforces this point, and it shows that MDT decision making isn't just about clinical input; it's about team performance. So we did this. Large regression analysis modeling on just under 1,000 cancer cases. And so we found that all of these components are significant predictors of teams' ability to make a treatment recommendation. So what matters is really how well the team integrates diverse information, manages the discussion, so that's the meeting management, and activates those key roles, radiology, pathology, etc. So it reflects how the team science conditions, predict real treatment decisions. So all of them matter equally. So just moving down this table, if you look here in the third row, we will shift our focus now from the team's internal functioning to the broader external pressures placed on the MDTs. So national and international policy documents acknowledge that cancer delivery is under huge pressure. Now, this is globally. So in response, MDTs are expected to focus more on complex cases. So this is, in theory, it's a fair goal. But what we're seeing in practice is really a mounting workload burden, And MDT meetings that used to be, you know, 1 or 2 hours are now stretching to 5 hours or more. So we are seeing that even, you know, in well-functioning teams, the case volume starts to impact the team. So from SCIT's perspective, this is a pressure test of multiple SCIT's conditions. So while the guidance urges MDTs to do more, the structures and resources within the NHS they rely on have not scaled with those expectations. So let's look at some data in relation to this. So what I'm showing you here is the first study of its kind, which I conducted as part of my PhD about 6 years ago now, where we quantitatively measured using validated tools. So what this tells you, first of all, is that measuring teamwork can be done quantitatively. It can be done qualitatively, but it can also be done quantitatively. And so we quantitatively measured how different team components, you know, like communication styles, gender balance, workload, fatigue, etc., impact MDT decision making. And decision making being defined as quality of information and quality of contribution. And due to its significance, this study was actually featured in an NIHR evidence alert with a clear and helpful summary available. If people are interested, I can share the link. Actually, the link is here at the bottom of the slides. So let me just briefly take you through this. So in simple terms, communication really matters. So if you look at here, positive and negative communication, so when communication was respectful, open and supportive, so that's positive communication, quality of decision making, so both information quality and team member contributions improved. But when communication was dismissive, overly critical or rushed, so that's the negative communication on the left, both the quality of discussion and information suffered. Next, team composition counts too. So teams with better gender balance tended to have slightly better information exchange. But when gender imbalance was pronounced, the quality of team members' participation worsened. We also saw that bigger teams did have access to more information, which was good, but simply having more people in the room didn't guarantee better participation. So it's about how effectively team members are engaged, not just how many there are in the room. And crucially, you know, factors like cognitive fatigue, high workload, and logistical issues had a clear negative impact on the quality of contributions to discussion. As people became tired or overwhelmed, decisions and discussions became less effective. So given these findings, we then wanted to zoom in specifically on how fatigue impacts MDT effectiveness across the duration of meetings. So to do this, we closely examined decision-making process at 2 points, the first half of the meeting and the second half of the meeting. And we found that by default, teams tend to organize their caseload with more clinically complex cases or agenda items discussed first, assuming they'll perform best when fresh at the start of the meeting. But the results revealed a surprising pattern, as you can see here with the arrows pointing up in the first half and down in the second half. So while complex cases were handled effectively at the beginning, decision-making quality dropped significantly in the second half and team interactions became more strained. Fewer questions were asked by the members and the ability to manage complex discussions declined. So rather than helping them, this practice of front-loading complex cases or complex agenda items proved counterproductive. And this created something called, let me see if I can bring this on the screen, something we called cognitive catch-22 or no-win scenario. So teams naturally place complexity upfront on their meeting agenda when they're fresh, yet doing so exhausts their capacity and undermining later decisions further down the agenda. So from the team side's perspective, this tells us that we need careful strategies to ensure teams remain effective throughout meetings, such as, strategic breaks or even shortening meetings altogether, and careful scheduling of the agenda as well. What I'm showing you here is a paper. This is all based, by the way, on published papers. So if you're interested, I can share these papers with you. What you're looking at here, this is based on the study we published and that won an award at SCIT's International Network for Science of Team Science in 2019 for the most innovative team research. And what it tells you, what it shows is what happens when we look at, how team members take turns during discussions, during meetings. So we found that MDTs are exceptionally fast-paced interactionally. There are hardly any pauses when they change turns. So only about 3% of exchanges have a gap, compared to 60% in other organizations. And around 73% have no gaps or no overlaps. So basically people speak one after the other rapidly. But we also saw something, if you look here at the bottom, something very interesting. In the 24% of exchanges where people talk at the same time. So over half of these were actually competitive overlaps. And the other words for this is interruptions rather than cooperative exchanges. So that means people were often speaking over each other to assert their views, not necessarily to build on them. And why does that matter? So, from a SCITS perspective, fast-paced interactions can come at the cost. It might look efficient, we're doing things really quickly, but it can suppress voices, and especially those who are less assertive, more junior, or simply trying to process complex information. So we're talking about cognitive diversity as well. Now, just last complex diagram I'm going to show you, but it's really important to communicate this to you. So let's take a closer look at why these communication patterns matter. So especially from a team science perspective. So this slide shows a typical speaking exchange based on a detailed moment-to-moment analysis I did as part of this study. So in most everyday conversations, we see short pauses when people are speaking. These are called gaps of around 0.2 seconds between turns. And these gaps give people time to process what's been said, right? Then plan their response and check their assumptions. But in cancer MDTs, those gaps are almost, non-existent. Only 3% of interactions have them. So instead, communication is dominated by rapid transitions or direct overlaps and interruptions. And why is this important? Because when people, they don't understand, we jump into, sorry, I think I lost my train of thought. I will come back to it. When people speak this quickly, they're often predicting the rest of somebody's sentence, so you're jumping into conclusion about what other person is about to say rather than fully comprehending it. And that increases the risk of misunderstanding and reduces opportunities for thoughtful, high quality contributions by team members. So from a SCITS point of view, this undermines three conditions, opportunity to contribute, something that we were able to see visually in those bar charts, clarity of communication and shared understanding. So even outside of healthcare, these dynamics are likely at play in other fast-paced teams, academic teams, technical, policy-focused, etc. It's just that we don't study them in as much detail as we study cancer MDTs. So the implication here is very clear, understanding how turn-taking in teams plays out in practice, and then deliberately managing it can help teams make better decisions, also make sure that everyone who needs to speak speaks, and reduce avoidable friction. And there are tools that we can use to help structure that process a little bit more, making it more deliberate. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, operational friction is also something we need to should be talking more about. And just to say, this is also the first study that managed to quantify logistical issues and then link them to quality of team working and decision making. This has also been published and it's peer reviewed. So far we focused on the human side of teamwork, but this slide highlights something, far more mundane and just as critical, and that's the operational friction or logistical issues. So by that, we mean problems categorized here: meeting equipment, admin errors, process issues, and attendance. And these are broken down into even further subcategories. If you're interested, I can share the paper with you. But So it's really things like, tech failures, missing information, unclear processes, or key people just not being present. So in this study, we found that 42% of agenda items in MDTs encountered at least one logistical problem. And here's the key finding. So these, seemingly small issues like wrong patient detail, a missing scan, or a frozen screen were strongly correlated with longer discussion time. And in fact, they explained more variance in meeting duration than any single clinical factor, including disease severity. So what does this tell us? That high-performing teams don't just depend on that expertise, in this case, clinical expertise, they also depend on solid logistical infrastructure. So when basic support systems break down, even just briefly, teams waste time, lose focus, and risk making poorer decisions. And this isn't just, a healthcare problem, whether it's an MDT research team, logistical, you call it, excellence is a core condition for effective teamwork. So this model brings everything I've told you just now together, and many of the issues that we discussed so far. So it's called ODDI model. You might remember right at the beginning, I talked about how important it is to structure team decision making. And this is one way of doing it. It's a framework. And so basically it describes orientation, where you share information, discuss, you exchange that information, identify errors, etc. You make a decision and then you implement that decision. So these are the core steps most teams go through when making collective decisions. But in practice, we found that MDTs frequently break down at every stage. Okay, so sometimes teams can't even start properly because there's just simply not enough information. Other times they have the information, so they start the discussion, but they cannot reach a decision because something is missing. And even when decisions are reached, there are too many instances when the MDT decision actually cannot be implemented. For reasons, they might have not considered patient choice or psychosocial aspects or things like that. So you might agree that this is not just frustrating, but it does actually have consequences. So patient care becomes more complex. So now the patient needs to wait yet another week or another month for their treatment recommendation to be formulated. Team workload it will inevitably increase because those patients now need to be put on the meeting agenda for another meeting where there are already a lot of patients to be discussed. And then system-wide issues, there's a rise with all of this in cost and inefficiencies. So from SCIT's perspective, again, this model helps us pinpoint where support might be needed. So not just in making better decisions, but in building, better conditions for team working, for decisions to actually happen. So let's take a very quick look at the hidden cost of these breakdowns. Something that's never been done. I've not seen this being done for academic meetings, but I just wanted to show you this as an illustrative example. It is really interesting when you start looking at these costs. So team meetings don't just, cost time, they do cost money. So a single MDT meeting, this has been done by other researchers, not myself, but there's a long reference list for this slide. If you're interested in, I can share it with you. So when you scale that, these costs, across a year, the costs quickly reach hundreds of thousands per organization. And over, what do we have here, 150 million nationally. And that's just, the financial cost. So for from a team size perspective, let me just see if I can bring this up. Okay. Ineffective meetings amplify those costs, especially when there's poor structure, unclear roles, or communication breakdowns. We don't have, these numbers for academic meetings, like I said, but we know the same principles, would apply. So inefficiencies in meetings can lead to wasted time, reduced productivity, and poorer outcomes. It just adds another perspective to this. And so we're moving now down to the last row, which is about tools and measurements. And there's a very important message I would like to convey here. So one of the most practical and widely endorsed recommendations for cancer MDTs nationally is the use of validated tools to assess their performance. So, and that's specified in their guidelines. They clearly support this approach. So, and scientific evidence backs this up. We now have a growing range of validated tools that can be used to assess team performance. But despite this, I see many academic and scientific teams still underuse these tools. They are used, but I think if you compare it to cancer MDTs, it's not really at the same level. So it's quite impressive, I think, how far cancer MDT research has gone in assessing teamwork. And they've made, significant strides. As we have done Lancet, a systematic review for the Lancet. We're just finishing it off, and actually the UK is the leading global contributor to evidence on MDT effectiveness. And also in the UK, we produce the largest number of tools for team evaluation as well that are actually used internationally. So the key takeaway is that those tools are not just, available. They are feasible, they can be used, and they're proven to work, and increasingly essential for embedding learning and improvement directly into daily team practice. So let me just show you what it looks like. So here we go. We've got a list of, these are general purpose team science tools. And as you can see, they measure different aspects of team working, and predominantly surveys, some peer assessment tools as well. And I can share links with you as well if people are interested. So what you see here are some of the most widely used general purpose instruments. Team climate inventory is particularly useful. We use them with cancer MDTs as well. And they offer, a practical starting point for teams to reflect, measure, and improve how they function.
Now, Tayana,
yes,
just a couple more minutes. I just want to leave time for chat, for discussion, because this is fantastic.
No problem.
Do carry on.
I've got 2 more slides just to finish the narrative. Thank you. So, so these are what I've shown you are general purpose tools, but you might decide, I actually want to design something more domain specific for my team. And what I want to convey in this slide is that can be done, because we have done that for cancer MDTs. What you're looking at here are tools specifically designed for MDTs. So that can be done for your domain also. Now, how do you use these tools, meaningfully? So that, so they're not just for one-off measurement. They can be embedded within a cycle of reflection, and that's what I'm showing you up here. Feedback and improvement. So whatever, whether you're using TDS or MDT mode, the logic is the same. You start with a baseline assessment to understand how team is functioning. Then after, you introduce a change, team agreed change. And finally, you can then use the results to facilitate the reflection. So you feed that data back to the team for reflections. It's a bit like, you're holding up a mirror to say, look, this is what's happening. What do you think? How could we improve the processes together? So, and this approach is we called it team audit and feedback. So where does all this take us? So if we're serious, about advancing team science in real world settings, then one-off intervention or measurement is just not going to cut it. So we do need to create a learning system, and that's what I've been building in cancer MDTs. So a structured way of gathering data on how teams actually function, feeding that back into team discussion, and supporting meaningful team-driven change, and then sharing learning and resources across settings. So it's about creating this feedback loop that is driven by the team and not imposed on them, if that makes sense. And it's entirely, transferable, whether you're talking about chronic care, operational teams, research collaboration. The core idea is, when teams are empowered to examine and evolve their own practice, change becomes not only more sustainable, but more meaningful. But it's that meaningful change is really what drives sustainable change, because often the biggest problem is sustaining that change. So we found that if that change is team driven and meaningful, it's more likely to stay. If that makes sense. Okay, and I just wanted to return to that question I left you with when we begin exploring cancer MDTs, So what might MDTs teach us about enabling high-functioning, diverse teams across disciplines? And I promise this is the last slide. So they're more than a clinical model. So they're a stress test for collaboration. And under pressure with diverse experts, high stakes, they surface common team challenges, human challenges, actually. They don't think that way. They think that they've got these extraordinary problems. I try to tell them they're actually just human problems. And even participation, unclear roles, information gaps, and poor communication. And these are not, like I said, healthcare specific. They show up across research in our academic teams. We have them also. But the core lesson is this, collaboration doesn't just happen. It has to be designed deliberately. So it does require structured processes, evaluation tools, and it's about making good decisions, hearing all voices and following through. And I think when teams get that right, the impact can be real, for outcomes, for systems, and for people. So it is really how, it's about how we solve complex problems well together. I think that's the core. And so I think we're going to have an interactive session, but I just wanted to, just kind of leave you with this thought. If we want science that truly solves or serves society, we do need to structure for it, not just, aspire to it. So what shapes your teamwork? And I'm going to hand over to Ruth. Am I on time, Ruth?
We're going to
just a few minutes over.
We're probably going to skip the activity, so you can stop sharing your slides, Tayana, just because of time. So we're going to wrap up. We have to wrap up at 3. So it's not what we'll do is we'll just have questions in the round. And what I'll do is I've just put together a quick poll. And I've put that. I'll put that in the chat. I'll put it in now. So that's a quick question that I'd like to ask. It's one of the things Tayana and I were thinking about talking about in this session. So if everyone would like to take that poll whilst we're chatting, and we'll just take questions to Tayana. But first of all, thank you so much, Tayana. That was absolutely fantastic, and so many things that resonate, and things that we're really pleased, because our a lot of what you're saying is what we talk about in our training, so that validates us, which is quite nice, and much more learnt as well. And a few people have asked for slides and links and things like that, so I think we might have to have you back for another session at some point. Can I open the room up for questions? Either if please do the poll. I'd really like to see what people are thinking on that. And if you would like to put a question in the chat or put your hand up, we'll come to you either way. First of all, Emma.
Hi, thanks for that. That was really interesting. It's something I've been studying on a course myself recently, so it's and a lot of it touches nerves as well, because you know how it should be done right, and it just feels almost impossible sometimes. I just wanted to ask you specifically about the Belbin questionnaire and your opinion on its value, because I hear mixed opinions about the value of that.
Thank you. Which questionnaire? Which one?
The Belbin inventory.
You
noted it there, and I remembered that we talked about this in the past, and people weren't sure of its value really.
Yeah, so I haven't used it before.
Okay.
The one I used, so I wouldn't be able to comment on it from the practical point of view, but Team Climate Inventory, TCI, if you're using it for general purposes, it is really good. I've used it with MDTs. It has also been used in various other contexts outside of cancer, cancer care, and it works really well. It's easy to fill out. Let me put it that way. Yeah.
Okay.
And it is useful. It's very useful, yeah. But the other one, yeah, I'm not sure, because I've not used it. And to bear in mind, I mean, this is a good point. There are a lot of tools. Not every tool will be useful. You might find that actually some tools are not useful at all. And this is why I mentioned that second slide. You might actually need to design a domain-specific tool to make it more useful. But when you do that, you just need to bear in mind the psychometric properties, making sure that the tool is reliable and valid, that it measures what it's meant to measure, and that it measures that consistently, in other words, reliably.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Charlie, did you have something to come back on that? Or
no, I had a different question, but Desiree had a question in the chat, so I'd rather their question was answered. I can catch up with Tayana another time.
Sounds good. Desiree, do you want to read it? Ask your question verbally. Do you want me to read it out? I'll read it out. Oh, go on.
Hi there. Thank you very much. Thanks so much for the talk. Very insight, very, very, very interesting and encouraging. I was wondering from your experience, if you had any thoughts or hypothetical ideas around what you think would be affordances or enablers and limitations or obstacles for interdisciplinary academic research teams.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, really, really good question. And I think that obstacles, I think, will be very similar to what we've seen with cancer MDTs, you know. And in addition to that, it's that institutional support. I think the way, you know, higher education is structured, this idea of projectification of researchers doesn't quite support continuous team working, because, you know, you fund teams for a few years and then they just dissolve. And it's very hard to build that expertise and that glue, that team working under such conditions. So I think that's the kind of fundamental condition which I hope will change in the future. It needs to change, you know, for better science. And in terms of the sort of day-to-day, I think I find that, and literature as well, and the MDT research supports it, there's always this problem of integration. You know, first getting that equal inclusion, getting people to contribute equally, and having these discussions and academic meetings really driven by just, you know, a handful of people or the most senior people. So I do sometimes think about, you know, what does our science represent? Does it represent everyone's opinions, or does it represent just opinions and drives of only, you know, the most, you know, only handful of people, a handful of opinions? Is it a bit skewed, in other words? So how do we make it more inclusive? And I think that starts with individual teams, making sure people contribute and that we create those conditions that make people feel safe to contribute, share their ideas. I think is yeah. So in other words, contribution and that integration of ideas. So even sometimes when people contribute, what you find is that the ideas that people share are not always integrated very well. So that's the second component. There is an example from my recent work. We were developing, I was working on developing or defining value proposition for diagnostic technology, and I work with a range of different stakeholders to kind of help define it. And what I ended up doing is applying thematic analysis on our own meetings, because I found it incredibly difficult to do just that, you know, integrate diverse perspectives. So I decided the best way to do this is just to apply thematic analysis, categorize everyone's opinions under themes, and that really helped. But of course, it also, you know, it's time consuming. You do need to have enough time to do this, and it's not probably feasible to do that for every meeting that we have. But that's contribution and information integration.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions? All right. Okay, I'll just hand over. Thank you again, Tayana, for your time and that comprehensive, really interesting, and lots of challenges for us to cover. But I'll hand over to Charlie just to close the session, just with a couple of reflections.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. Thanks again, Tayana. That was great. I think we could ask questions all day, and thanks to Laura as well, who I know has had to leave the meeting. But I think a really interesting session we had today. I think thinking about Pure as a tool for collaboration is really interesting, because I've only thought of it as somewhere to put your grants and publications. So to have that as a tool that we can use more broadly to encourage collaboration, I think is great. And I'm certainly keen to learn more about that. And Tayana, your examples of cancer MDTs is really interesting, because this is a group of people who are mandated to come together, and this is imposed upon them, and they're mandated to come together from different disciplines, but actually it doesn't seem that they necessarily have the support or the time to be able to understand how to work more effectively or more efficiently together and to apply team science principles, which I think you've demonstrated today would be beneficial to all of them. And maybe, Emma, this is something you can influence as part of your leadership course and your key role in the cancer world. But I certainly think there are lots of things for us to take back and to think about within the training that we provide. And I'm sure other questions for you, Tiana, and an opportunity for you to come back and join us in the future. So once again, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Tiana. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Ruth, for chairing and hosting it. Thank you, Karen, for setting it all up. Thank you, everybody. Do you want the final word, Ruth, or are we off?
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.